You're trespassing on OUR property, old man! I told you specifically I wouldn't tolerate this noise near my property. Do you understand me, Marcus? Clean this up now!
You're trespassing on our property, old man. The woman's shrill voice cut through the morning air like a chainsaw. She stood there in her designer athleisure wear, manicured finger jabbing toward my chest, her face twisted with rage. I don't care what you think you own, this peninsula belongs to the Sunset Ridge Homeowners Association, and if you don't get off this land in the next 60 seconds, I'm calling the police. I looked down at the pile of splintered wood at my feet, what used to be the gazebo my late wife Sarah and I had built together 15 years ago. The bulldozer sat there, engine still rumbling, its blade dripping with fresh earth and broken memories. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice level despite the fury boiling in my chest, "my family has owned this land since 1967. You just destroyed—" "I don't give a damn what you think your family owned," she screamed, stepping so close I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the stench of entitlement. "We have the paperwork. We have the permits. We have 27 luxury townhomes under construction here, and you," she shoved a document into my chest, "you have a bill for $500 for obstruction of authorized development." Behind her, a crew of construction workers stood frozen, watching this confrontation unfold. One of them, a younger guy with a guilty expression, wouldn't meet my eyes. The woman I'd later learn her name was Melissa Thornwood, president of the Sunset Ridge HOA, turned to the bulldozer operator and shrieked, "What are you waiting for? Finish clearing this area, all of it!" "But, ma'am," the operator stammered, "that's his gazebo, and there's still—" I said, "Clear it!" Her voice reached a pitch that could shatter glass. "Or you're fired!" That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I didn't yell back. I didn't throw a punch. I simply stepped back, pulled out my phone, and started recording. "Go ahead," I said quietly, my Marine Corps training keeping my voice steady as steel. "Finish your work, build every single townhome, pour every foundation. I want to watch you complete this entire project." Melissa's face twisted into a triumphant sneer. "Finally showing some sense, old man. Now get off my property before I have you arrested." She turned on her heel and marched back to her white Range Rover, barking orders into her phone. As the bulldozer roared back to life and crushed the last remaining corner post of the gazebo, the post where Sarah had carved our initials in 2009, I stood there with my phone recording every moment. They thought they'd broken me. They thought I'd given up. They had no idea I was about to turn their multi-million-dollar development into the biggest mistake of their lives. Let me take you back to where this nightmare really began, 3 months earlier, on a Tuesday morning in late August 2024. I'm Marcus Chen, 58 years old, retired Marine Corps civil engineer with 32 years of service. I'd spent 3 decades building bridges, airstrips, and forward operating bases in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. When I retired in 2022, all I wanted was peace. The kind of peace that comes from watching the sun rise over Puget Sound from the deck of the home my wife and I had dreamed about for 20 years. We found our slice of heaven in 2008, a 5-acre peninsula jutting into the Sound just north of Tacoma, Washington. The place was wild, overgrown, and perfect. Sarah and I spent every weekend for a year clearing brush, building trails, and constructing that gazebo by hand. We'd sit there in the evenings, watching eagles hunt and seals surface, planning our retirement down to the last detail. Cancer took her in 2021, just 6 months before I was supposed to retire. She never got to see me come home for good. That peninsula, that gazebo, every tree and stone, it was all we had left together. Our daughter Jessica was grown, living in Portland with her own family. This was my sanctuary, my connection to Sarah, my proof that our life together had meant something. The morning of August 27th, 2024, started like any other. I was on the small dock I'd built, coffee in hand, watching a great blue heron stalk through the shallows. The water was glass smooth, reflecting the pink and orange sky. Then I heard it. the deep rumble of heavy diesel engines. I turned and felt my blood run cold. A convoy of vehicles was rolling down the narrow access road that connected my peninsula to the mainland. Dump trucks, excavators, a concrete mixer, and at least a dozen pickups with contractor logos. They weren't slowing down at the private property sign I'd posted. They weren't stopping at all. I jogged up from the dock, my old knees protesting, and reached the vehicles just as they began to spread out across the southern tip of my land. A woman in a hard hat was directing traffic, clipboard in hand, pointing to different areas. She saw me approaching and smiled, the kind of smile a person gives when they're about to deliver bad news and enjoy it. "Good morning," she called out cheerfully. "You must be Mr. Chen." "I'm Melissa Thornwood, president of the Sunset Ridge Community Association. We're starting phase 2 of our development today. Exciting, isn't it?" I stared at her, completely confused. "I think there's been a mistake. This is private property. My property." Her smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Actually, according to our updated site plan filed with Pierce County, this entire southern section," she gestured broadly at about 3 acres of my land, including where my gazebo stood, is designated as common area for the Sunset Ridge development. We're building 27 luxury townhomes here. Beautiful units, really. You should consider yourself lucky. Your property value is about to skyrocket." "That's impossible," I said, keeping my voice calm even as panic started to creep in. "My family has owned this peninsula since 1967. I have the deed." Melissa's expression shifted to something that looked like pity but felt like contempt. "Mr. Chen, I understand change can be difficult, especially for someone your age. But we have all the proper documentation. The land was legally transferred to the Development Trust in 2019 as part of a county rezoning initiative. If you'd like, I can have our attorney send you the paperwork, though I'm sure you'll find everything is in order." 2019? That's impossible. I was living here in 2019. Nobody contacted me about any transfer. She shrugged, her patience clearly wearing thin. "That's between you and the county, sir. But as of today, we have permits to begin construction, and that's exactly what we're doing. Now, if you'll excuse me, we have work to do." She turned away, dismissing me like I was a bothersome child. I stood there, watching in disbelief as workers began marking out building sites with orange spray paint. They were painting lines across my hiking trails, through my garden beds, right up to within 20 feet of my gazebo. "Hey," I called out to Melissa, who was now talking to a foreman. "You need to stop this, right now. I'm telling you, you're on private property without permission." She spun around, and this time there was no fake smile. "Mr. Chen, if you continue to interfere with permitted construction, I will call the sheriff's department and have you removed for trespassing. Is that what you want? Trespassing. On my own land." The absurdity of it should have been funny, but there was nothing funny about the way she looked at me like I was already gone, already defeated, already irrelevant. I went back to my house, my hands shaking as I unlocked the door. The sound of engines and voices followed me inside. I went straight to my home office, the small room where Sarah used to do her watercolor paintings, and pulled open the filing cabinet where we kept all our important documents: birth certificates, marriage license, service records, insurance policies, all neatly organized in Sarah's precise handwriting. But when I got to the folder labeled Property Deed Peninsula, my heart sank. The folder was there. It was empty. I tore through that cabinet for 2 hours. I checked every folder, every drawer, every box in the closet. I went through the safe in our bedroom. I searched places that made no sense. Kitchen drawers, garage shelves, even the attic. Nothing. The deed was gone. Without that piece of paper, I had no proof. Just stories and memories and a tax bill that could easily be explained away as bureaucratic error. I sat down at Sarah's old painting desk, my head in my hands, listening to the chainsaws start up outside. They were beginning to clear trees. A week crawled by. Every morning, I woke to the sound of construction. They were working fast, clearly trying to establish themselves before anyone could stop them. I watched from my windows as they cleared 3 acres of forest, including a stand of old-growth Douglas firs that Sarah and I used to picnic under. I called Pierce County Planning. I got bounced between departments for 45 minutes before reaching someone who actually looked up my property records. "Sir," the board clerk said, "according to our system, the southern portion of that peninsula was transferred to the Sunset Ridge Development Trust in July 2019. The paperwork is all in order, but I never signed anything. I never agreed to any transfer. Sir, if you have a dispute about ownership, that's a civil matter. You'll need to contact an attorney." I called 3 attorneys. 2 didn't return my messages. The third, a tired-sounding woman named Patricia Gomez, agreed to a consultation. I drove to her office in Tacoma, a cramped suite above a Thai restaurant, and laid out my situation. She listened, taking notes, her expression growing more sympathetic and more pessimistic with each detail. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and sighed. "Mr. Chen, I'll be honest with you. Without the original deed, you're fighting uphill. These HOA development groups, they're sophisticated. They have legal teams and they know how to work the system. If they filed paperwork with the county and got it approved, even fraudulently, it's going to take years and tens of thousands of dollars to unwind it. But it's my land," I said, hearing the desperation in my own voice. "I believe you, but belief doesn't win in court. Evidence does. My retainer is $5,000, and I estimate you'll need at least $30,000 to pursue this properly, maybe more, and there's no guarantee you'll win." I left her office feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I'm not wealthy. I have my Marine retirement and Sarah's life insurance, which I'd carefully invested for my old age. $30,000 would devastate me. And there was no guarantee. The next letter from Melissa arrived 3 days later. Certified mail. It was a formal notice of encroachment fee, $500, for my unauthorized personal items on Sunset Ridge property, specifically my gazebo and the small fire pit Sarah and I had built near the shore. They were charging me for existing on my own land. I drove over to the construction site the next morning. A chain-link fence had gone up overnight, blocking off the entire southern section. Melissa was there, supervising the pour of the first foundation. I parked and walked up to the fence. "This has to stop," I called out to her. "You're destroying everything. That gazebo, my wife and I built that together. She died 2 years ago. It's all I have left of her." Melissa walked over, her hard hat pristine, her expression a perfect mask of corporate concern. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "I understand you're going through something difficult. Grief can make us hold on to things we need to let go of. But this is progress. This development will bring jobs, revenue, and beautiful homes to this community. Your little shed. It's not a shed. It's a gazebo. Your structure is in the way of progress. And honestly," she leaned closer to the fence, lowering her voice to something almost intimate, "you should be thanking us. Once these townhomes are complete, your remaining property will be worth 3 times what it is now. You're welcome." The casual dismissal of Sarah's memory, the reduction of our life together to an obstacle in the way of profit, something snapped inside me. Not into rage, but into cold, crystalline clarity. "You know what?" I said quietly. "You're right. Build your townhomes. Build all 27 of them. Take your time. Make them perfect." She looked surprised, then pleased. "I'm so glad you're finally seeing reason. I want to watch every foundation poured, every wall raised, every window installed. I want to see this whole project completed." Her smile widened. "That's the spirit. Maybe we can even get you a discount on one of the units when they're done." I turned and walked back to my truck, leaving her standing there in her victory. She thought I'd given up. She thought she'd broken the old man. She had no idea what I was really doing. That night, I sat down at my computer and did what Marine engineers do best. I made a plan. Not an emotional plan. Not a revenge fantasy. A cold, logical, step-by-step plan to prove what was mine. I started with what I knew for certain. My father, James Chen, had purchased this peninsula in 1967 for $12,000. I'd found the original newspaper clipping of the sale in Sarah's scrapbook. The article even included a photo of my dad standing on this exact shore. I knew there had been a survey done when he bought it. In those days, every property purchase required a certified survey. That survey would have marked the boundaries with permanent markers, probably iron rebar driven deep into the ground. Those markers wouldn't have moved. They couldn't have moved. They were my proof. I called the Pierce County Surveyor's office and asked for the historical survey records for my address. They told me records from the 1,960 seconds had been digitized, but would take 2 weeks to retrieve from archives. "I'll wait," I said. While I waited, I did something else. I contacted the Washington State Department of Ecology. I had learned in my research that any development near waterfront property required environmental impact assessments, especially for septic systems. I filed a public records request for all permits associated with the Sunset Ridge development. 3 weeks later, I received 2 thick envelopes. The first contained a grainy digital scan of the 1,967 survey of my father's property. It clearly showed the entire peninsula as a single parcel, with iron markers placed at each corner. The surveyor's notes even included the GPS coordinates, converted from the old state plane coordinate system. The second envelope was even more interesting. It contained the Sunset Ridge permit applications. I stayed up all night reading through them. The development's site plan showed the townhomes being built on what they called Parcel 14C, Common Area Designation. But here's what made my blood run cold. There was no record of any land transfer, no deed, no purchase agreement, just a plat map that had been filed with the county showing the peninsula as part of the development, approved by some clerk who probably rubber-stamped 50 documents that day without actually verifying ownership. They hadn't bought the land. They hadn't legally acquired it. They had simply redrawn the map and hoped no one would notice. I took the survey coordinates from my father's 1,967 map and paid for a modern GPS survey from a licensed firm. The surveyor, a young veteran named David Coe, who I'd met through the local VFW, didn't ask questions. He just did the work. When he handed me the results 2 weeks later, I felt my hands start to shake. The old iron markers were still there, exactly where they'd been placed 57 years ago. And according to David's measurements, verified by GPS, accurate to within 2 centimeters, all 27 townhomes being constructed by Sunset Ridge were completely, entirely, unmistakably on my property. Not on disputed land, not in a gray area, on my land, according to markers that had been in the ground since before Melissa Thornwood was born. I had my proof. Now I needed to load the weapon. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse. I filed what's called a quiet title action, a legal proceeding asking a judge to officially declare who owns a piece of property when there's a dispute. The filing fee was $350, money I could barely afford, but it was worth every penny. The court sent official notice to the Sunset Ridge HOA, to Melissa Thornwood personally, and to the development company. They had 30 days to respond and present their evidence of ownership. I knew what Melissa would do. She'd see it as junk mail from a desperate old man. She'd laugh and throw it in the trash. Her arrogance was my greatest weapon. Sure enough, 30 days passed. No response, no lawyer showed up, nothing. On day 31, I appeared before Judge Sandra Whitmore in Pierce County Superior Court. The courtroom was nearly empty, just me, the judge, and a court reporter. I presented my father's original survey, the GPS verification from David Coe, the historical property tax records showing continuous ownership by my family for 57 years, and the complete absence of any legal transfer documents. Judge Whitmore reviewed the documents for about 10 minutes. Then she looked up at me. Then, at the empty defendant's table where Sunset Ridge should have been. "Mr. Chin," she said, "this appears to be fairly straightforward. The defendants have failed to respond or present any counter-evidence." She signed a court order with 3 swift strokes of her pen. "This court finds that you are the sole legal owner of the entire peninsula property, as described in the 1967 survey. The order is effective immediately." Just like that, I officially owned it again. Not that I'd ever stopped owning it, but now I had a judge's signature saying so. They just didn't know it yet. I didn't tell them. I didn't wave the court order in Melissa's face. I just went home and watched them work. By early November 2024, they had completed the foundations for all 27 townhomes. By late December, the framing was up. By February 2025, they were installing windows and starting on interior work. It was the first week of March when I made my next move. I called the Washington State Department of Ecology again, this time with a formal complaint. I informed them that 27 residential structures were being built on private property, my property, as confirmed by court order, without proper permits from the legal landowner. Worse, the septic systems they'd installed were draining directly into protected wetlands near the Sound, a federal EPA violation. The bureaucracy moved slowly at first. Then someone at the state level realized this could become a PR nightmare. Within a week, 3 different government agencies descended on the construction site. I watched from my deck as county code enforcement officers swarmed the property. They weren't there to chat. They went door to door on every townhome under construction, and they left bright orange, "Stop work, do not occupy" stickers on every single one. The sound of Melissa Thornwood's screaming carried across the water. I watched through binoculars as she confronted a code enforcement officer, waving her hands, her face purple with rage. The officer just pointed at his clipboard and kept writing citations. By noon, the entire construction site was shut down. Radio silence lasted exactly 4 hours. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Mr. Chen, it was Melissa, and her voice was pure venom. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you just made the biggest mistake of your life. We have $100 million invested in this project. I have lawyers who will bury you. When I'm done, you won't have a home, you won't have anything. Miss Thornwood," I said calmly, "I'd suggest you check your mail before you make any more threats." "What are you talking about?" "The court order should have been delivered to your office this morning. The one that says I own the land you built on. All of it." The silence on the other end was beautiful. "You're bluffing," she finally said, but her voice had lost its edge. "Come to the community meeting tomorrow night. Bring your board. Bring your lawyers. I'll be there." I hung up before she could respond. The Sunset Ridge Community Center was packed the next evening. Word had spread fast. The HOA was in crisis. Every resident who'd bought into the development, who'd paid HOA fees and special assessments, wanted answers. I arrived early and sat in the back row. I wore my old Marine Corps jacket, the one with my rank insignia still on the sleeve. I wanted them to see exactly who they were dealing with. Melissa stood at the front, flanked by her board members and 2 lawyers in expensive suits. She looked rattled but defiant. When she began speaking, her voice was shrill, defensive. "We are facing a coordinated attack by a disgruntled individual who is trying to sabotage this community's investment. The recent stop work orders are based on frivolous complaints filed by someone with a personal vendetta. I want to assure you that our legal team is handling this, and construction will resume shortly." A man in the 3rd row stood up. "Melissa, I paid a $50,000 assessment for this phase. What's going on? Do we own these townhomes or not?" "Of course we do. We have all the proper documentation. Then why did the county shut us down?" a woman shouted. The room erupted in angry questions. Melissa tried to regain control, banging her gavel on the podium, but the crowd was turning. I could see it happening in real time, the loss of confidence, the creeping realization that they'd been lied to. I stood up. The room didn't go quiet, but enough people noticed that Melissa's eyes locked onto me. Her face drained of color. "You," she hissed into the microphone. "This is all your fault." I walked down the center aisle. Every eye in the room followed me. When I reached the front, I pulled the court order from my jacket pocket, the original, with Judge Whitmore's signature and the raised court seal. I placed it on the table in front of the board members. "Before you threaten to sue me," I said, my voice carrying without needing a microphone, "you might want to read this. It's a court order dated January 15th, 2025, signed by Judge Sandra Whitmore of Pierce County Superior Court. It confirms that I am the sole legal owner of the entire peninsula, including every square foot you built on. One of the lawyers grabbed the document. I watched his face change as he read it, confusion, then shock, then something close to panic. "This can't be right," he muttered. "We filed the plat. We got county approval." "You filed a map," I said. "You never actually bought the land. You just drew new lines and hoped no one would check." The room exploded. Residents were shouting questions, accusations flying in every direction. Melissa was screaming about forgeries, about lawsuits, about how this couldn't be happening. Then the back door opened. Sheriff's deputies walked in, followed by a woman in a suit carrying a badge, an investigator from the Washington State Attorney General's office. They walked straight to Melissa. "Melissa Thornwood," the investigator said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You're being served with a criminal complaint for fraud, forgery of public documents, and environmental violations. You need to come with us." Melissa's face went from red to white to gray. "This is insane. I have lawyers." "You can't just, ma'am, you can call your lawyer from the station, let's go." As the deputies escorted her out, she was still screaming, still threatening lawsuits, still insisting she'd done nothing wrong. The residents sat in stunned silence, watching their HOA president being led away in handcuffs. The board treasurer stood up, his hand shaking. What happens now?" I looked at him, then at the room full of terrified homeowners who just realized their investments might be worthless. "Now," I said, "we figure out how to fix this mess." The implosion of Sunset Ridge was spectacular and swift. Within a week, 3 more board members resigned. The development company that had partnered with Melissa declared bankruptcy and vanished. The forensic accountants who came in to examine the HOA's books found years of embezzlement, inflated contracts, and kickbacks. Melissa was facing federal charges. The lawyers who'd enabled her were facing disbarment, and 27 families were left with townhomes they couldn't legally occupy, built on land they didn't own. The residents held an emergency meeting and voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. They were done with Melissa's regime of fines and restrictions and manufactured crises. But they still had a problem: me. A delegation came to my house on a rainy afternoon in late March. 3 residents, led by a schoolteacher named Patricia Ruiz, who'd always been kind to me, stood on my porch looking nervous and defeated. "Mr. Chen," Patricia said, "we owe you an apology. We should have listened when you tried to warn us. We were scared of Melissa. We were cowards." I invited them in, made coffee, and we sat around my kitchen table. "What happens to our homes?" Another resident, an older man named Tom, asked quietly. "We put our life savings into these townhomes. I'd been thinking about this question for weeks. I had the legal right to bulldoze every structure and restore my land. I could sue them all into oblivion. I could salt the earth with their financial ruin, but I'm a builder, not a destroyer. And Sarah wouldn't have wanted that. Here's what I'm thinking," I said. "Those townhomes are well built. The bones are solid. It would be a waste to tear them down." "So, what are you saying?" Patricia asked. "I'm saying I'll bring them up to code, real code, with proper permits from the actual landowner me. Then I'll sell them. But the families currently living in them get first right of purchase at a fair price." Tom's eyes widened. "You'd do that? After everything?" "I'm not Melissa Thornwood," I said simply. "I don't win by crushing people. I win by building things right." Over the next 3 months, I became the unlikely project manager of the development I'd fought against. I hired proper engineers, installed legal septic systems that didn't dump into the sound, and brought every townhome up to code. It cost me every penny of my savings and then some. But in June 2025, all 27 townhomes passed final inspection. They were legal, they were mine, and they were ready for sale. 15 of the families bought their townhomes directly from me. I gave them fair prices, enough to cover my costs and provide a modest profit, but not the inflated prices Melissa had been charging. The other 12 units sold within weeks on the open market, many to young families and veterans. When the final sale closed on August 1st, 2025, I sat down with my accountant and looked at the numbers. After repaying my costs, I'd netted just over $2.3 million. My daughter Jessica flew up from Portland when she heard. She sat across from me at that same kitchen table, tears in her eyes. "Dad, you're rich. You could retire anywhere. You could travel." "You could." I shook my head. "The money was never the point, honey." The next day, I wrote 2 checks. The first was to a national organization that builds mortgage-free homes for wounded veterans. I donated $1 million in Sarah's name. The second check was harder to write. I donated $500,000 to the Pierce County Land Conservation Trust, specifically for protecting waterfront ecosystems in Puget Sound. I wanted to make sure what Melissa had tried to do, building over wetlands, destroying habitat, could never happen to anyone else. The rest, I kept. Enough to live comfortably and leave something for Jessica and my grandkids. But the real change wasn't in my bank account. It was in the community itself. Without the HOA's constant fines and restrictions, the neighborhood transformed. People started talking to each other again. They had barbecues. They borrowed tools. They helped each other with yard work. Tom and Patricia led an effort to rename our little corner of the county. At the next town council meeting, they proposed calling it Chen Point after my family's decades of stewardship. The motion passed unanimously. The local newspaper did a story about the whole saga. The headline read, "Marine Veteran Defeats HOA Tyranny, Donates Millions to Charity." Melissa's mugshot was right there on the front page, next to a photo of me standing on my newly rebuilt gazebo. Speaking of which, that gazebo. I couldn't rebuild it myself. My knees aren't what they used to be, but the community did. One Saturday in September, about 30 neighbors showed up with lumber and tools. We rebuilt it together, board by board, stronger than before. When it was done, we bolted a small brass plaque to the main post. "In memory of Sarah Chen, 1963 to 2021, who believed home was the safest harbor." This morning, exactly 1 year after that first confrontation with Melissa, I'm sitting in that gazebo with my coffee. The sun is coming up over Puget Sound, burning off the mist. It's quiet again, the kind of quiet that settles into your bones. Across the water, I can see lights coming on in the townhomes. Families starting their days. Kids getting ready for school. People living their lives in homes that almost destroyed us all, now built on honesty instead of lies. My phone buzzes. It's a text from Patricia. "Community potluck tonight at the new pavilion. You better be there, Mr. Chen." I smile. The new pavilion, that was Jessica's idea, built with some of the remaining money. A gathering place for a community that finally learned what it meant to be a community. Melissa is still in court, facing federal fraud charges. Her lawyers keep filing motions, keep trying to delay, but the evidence is overwhelming. I heard through the grapevine that she's trying to write a book about her wrongful persecution. Some people never learn. As for me, I've learned that justice doesn't always come from shouting the loudest or having the fanciest lawyers. Sometimes it comes from being patient, building your case carefully, and knowing when to let your enemies destroy themselves. I've learned that a piece of paper, whether it's a fraudulent plat or a court order, is only as powerful as the truth behind it. Truth is like iron rebar driven into granite. It doesn't move, it doesn't lie, it just waits. And I've learned that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's building something better than what they tried to take from you. The morning sun is warm on my face. In a few hours, I'll head over to the pavilion to help set up tables for the potluck. Tom wants to teach me how to smoke brisket. Patricia's bringing her famous tres leches cake. Jessica is driving up with the grandkids for the weekend. This is what Melissa tried to take from me. Not just land or money or property. She tried to take my peace, my connection to Sarah, my place in the world. She failed. The sign at the entrance to our neighborhood used to say, Sunset Ridge, a premier community. Someone took it down last month. In its place, the residents installed a new one. It's simple, carved from cedar, with letters painted in Marine Corps scarlet and gold. Chen Point Est. 1,967 all are welcome. I take another sip of my coffee and watch an eagle soar over the sound. Sarah would have loved this. All of it. The fight, the victory, the community we built from the ashes of Melissa's greed. But most of all, she would have loved this morning, this quiet, perfect morning, where everything is finally as it should be. Home.